in the last module, consisting of about 5 lectures, we have laid the foundation or mathematical foundation for getting into the electromagnetic theory. We will now begin with a discussion of electrostatics, as the name suggests that this is phenomena associated with charges which are not in motion. So, we will be talking about electric field and consequently a potential which arises from such a field. We begin with the basic principle of electrostatics, which is a charge q. It attracts or repels other charges depending upon the sign of the charge, and the force between charges is given by what is known as Coulomb's law. So, if you look at this diagram, you will realize that there is a charge q 1 I have kept at the position r 1, and there is a charge q 2 at the position r 2. The origin is absolutely arbitrary, because the form of the law does not depend upon choice of origin. The force between q 1 and q 2 is proportional to the product of the charges q 1 into q 2, and is inversely proportional to the square of the distance, namely r between them. The direction of the force is along the line joining the two charges. It is and there is of course, a multiplicative constant, which is in SI units, it is usually written as 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0, where epsilon 0 is known as the permittivity of the free space. I am assuming that these charges are interacting in vacuum, that is with no medium there being there. What happens when there is a medium in which these charges are located is something which we will be talking about much later in these lectures. Now, if F12 is the force on the charge 2 due to the charge 1, then by Newton's third law, the force 1 due to charge 2 is just the negative of that. That is the famous action reaction principle, and you have F12 is equal to minus F21. So, let us summarize what are the properties of the Coulomb's law force. Number 1 to note is that the force is inversely proportional to distance, and it is well, second thing is that if you look at the form, then it is clear that the force is repulsive if it is between like charges, and is attractive if the charges happen to be dissimilar, that is, one is positive, the other one is negative. The another characteristic of this charge is it is a 1 over r square force, which is essentially a long range force. Long range forces are those whose range is essentially infinite, that is, the force really never becomes 0 excepting at infinite distance. The other point to note is that the force is central force. The characteristic of the central force is that it is a force whose magnitude depends only on the distance between the two charges, and the second thing is its direction. Its direction is along the line joining the two charges. Along the line joining the two charges can imply that it is attractive or repulsive depending upon the mutual signs of these two charges. The constant of proportionality, which in standard international or SI units is written as 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0. The 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0 to a great deal of precision is 8.9874 into 10 to 9, but for all practical purpose we can take it as 9 into 10 to 9 Newton meter square per Coulomb square, and the epsilon 0 itself is the 8.854 into 10 to minus 12 Coulomb square by Newton meter square. Now, before we begin the process of electrostatics, let us look at this force little more in detail. It turns out that in the nature, we have basically 4 types of forces. They go by the name 4 fundamental forces of nature. The weakest of the force is what keeps our solar system, the planets, all the planets, the sun, everything at their place, and it is because of the gravitational force. This is an attractive force. Like electromagnetic force, however, it is of infinite range. It is a long range force. However, its strength is very small. Now, in a relatively speaking, there is a force which is known as the strong force. I will come to a discussion of that a little while later, but assuming that strong force has a unit 1, then the gravitational force has a magnitude which is 10 to the power minus 39 times that of the force which binds the nucleons together inside a nucleus. So, it is an extremely weak force. The next weaker force, again in this course we will have not much to do with it, is what is known as a weak nuclear force. This is a force which is responsible for beta decay, and it has a range which is fairly small, 10 to the power minus 18 meters, okay, and it is called weak nuclear force. And its strength, if gravitational force has a strength of 10 to minus 39, the weak nuclear force has a strength of 10 to minus 6. So, therefore, it is stronger than gravitational force, but it is still a weak force. The third force is the one with which we are involved in this course, which is the electromagnetic force. Of course, in this module we will be talking mostly about electrostatics. What is electromagnetic about it, we will come back much later. So, electromagnetic force has a relative strength of 1 over 137. 1 over 137 is a number which is the magnitude of the fine structure constant, E square over C h cross being the Planck's constant. So, the electromagnetic force has a strength, relative strength of E square over C h cross. C is the speed of light, h cross is a Planck's constant, and this number to a great deal of accuracy is 1 over 137. E is the electronic charge. So, it is something like 10 to minus 2, of the order 10 to minus 2, but the strongest of them all is what is known as a strong nuclear force. You all know that inside a nucleus there are protons and neutrons. Neutrons are neutral objects, whereas protons are positively charged objects. Now, in a nucleus these are bound together, in spite of the fact that the protons all have similar charges and the electrostatic or electromagnetic force between them is repulsive, and neutron has no charge at all. So, and the gravitational force is the only other force that could come in for neutral objects, and it is extremely weak force, but nevertheless the nucleus is bound together. Now, nucleus is bound together by a very special force, and its name is strong force, strong nuclear force. It exists between neutrons, protons, protons, protons and neutron, neutron. It is an extremely short range force. Its range is of the order of 10 to the power minus 15 meters, which is also called a Fermi, and that is typical nuclear dimension. Now, this force is, I am taking its strength as equal to 1. So, compared to this force, strong nuclear force, the electromagnetic force is about 1 by 100, I mean 2 orders of magnitude smaller. Now, second thing is that there is a problem that we come across which I will be briefly touching upon little later. And it appears that if you go from the classical theory to the quantum theory, which is known as the quantum field theory, knowledge of it is not important for our purpose, but it turns out that the force between two objects, any two objects, is mediated by a third particle, which is normally known as the carrier. That is, the crude explanation of that is that supposing you are looking at the interaction between, let us say, two charged bodies, then the picture is these two charged bodies are continuously exchanging particles and thereby remaining in touch with each other. And the fact that the force is propagated from, or force exists between two objects, is because of the fact that they continuously exchange particles. And these particles are known as bosons. Incidentally, boson, the name is after the famous Indian scientist Satyendranath Bose, and so these bosons are exchanged. Now, for reasons that I cannot go into in this course, that if the force between two objects is of finite range. Now, we already talked about strong force and the weak nuclear force. If it is a finite range, then the exchanged particles have masses. That is, they are particles which have mass. On the other hand, if the force is of long range, namely of infinite range, as it is for the gravitational force and the electromagnetic force, then the particles which they exchange happen to be massless. For our purpose, the electromagnetic force is a long range force. So, therefore, between two charged objects, there is always an exchange of a massless particle or a massless boson. The name of this massless boson is a photon. Photons are actually quantum of light, but again we will be probably talking about it in another course. So, and the photon is a neutral object without any mass. So, basically our picture of the force between two objects is that they are continuously exchanging photons, and normally photons are represented by the letter gamma. So, continuously they are exchanging photons. Now, another problem that I would like to point out in this context is that the existence of this inverse square law force, a long range force, that is perfectly okay, as long as the charges are static. However, supposing the charge, one of the charge, let us say, moves. Now, imagine these two charges are located at great distance. How does the force between them instantaneously change? Now, this thing is called action at a distance in physics. Action at a distance means that the force, if one of the object changes its position, let us say, the force on the second one, because the distance has changed, it changes instantaneously. Now, this is very difficult to understand, because according to special theory of relativity propounded by Einstein, no signal, no information can ever travel with a speed greater than the speed of light in vacuum, which is 3 into 10 to 8 meter per second. So, therefore, how does it work that as when an object moves, this information is essentially instantaneously transmitted to the object on which it is exerting a force. Now, it is in this context that one introduces the concept of a field associated with a charged object. We have discussed in detail the fields, scalar and the vector fields, but think of it very crudely in the following manner. Imagine it is a crude picture. Let us say that I am talking about two objects with each of which I associate a medium, and this medium, let us say, is tightly bound to these two objects. Now, when I move one of the particles, it deforms that medium. It deforms that medium because the charged body object is tightly bound to this medium which we are talking about. I am not talking about a material medium at this moment, this is just to fix your ideas. Therefore, this deformation can propagate and ultimately be communicated to other objects on which this one is exerting a force. Now, instead of talking about a medium, we say that with every object a field is associated. This field is the electromagnetic field, and when an object moves, the field associated with that object changes, and this information or deformation of the field, if you like, progresses with the speed of light. The electromagnetic theory is completely consistent with the special theory of relativity. So, let us proceed and define the electric field. Now, this is something which we have discussed earlier, and the field that is associated with a charged object is a vector field. In this case, we are talking about an electric field. Now, in order to fix our ideas about what is an electric field, consider a small charge, a minute charge. I will call it test charge. I have a charge, let us suppose this charge is q, I do not care how big or small that charge is, and around surrounding this I have my electric field of this charge q. Now, what I do is I put a small charge, let us call it q test, at a distance, let us say r. Now, this charge, as I told you, is infinitesimally small. This is required. It is required because there is a field due to the charge q, and if you bring in a test charge, this test charge will have its own field, which will result in changing the field of this charge q itself, and this process will go on. Now, if you bring in a infinitesimally small charge, we assume that its field is not strong enough to significantly change the electric field due to this charge q. Now, we define the field due to charge q as the ratio of the force that is felt by this test charge q divided by the magnitude of the test charge in the limit of this test charge going to 0, the magnitude of the test charge going to 0. So, the electric field of the source charge, which I called as q there, is the force exerted on a unit test charge. The formal definition is E is equal to limit q test going to 0 of force F on the q test divided by the q test. Now, obviously, such a definition does not depend upon the magnitude of the test charge q itself, qt itself. Now, so if according to this definition, if the electric field at the point P happens to be E, then if you put a charge, now this electric field is due to some source or sources. I am not specifying now what has given rise to this electric field. Now, suppose you put a charge q at this point P, then a charge q at that point will experience a force given by q times E. Now, let us suppose the electric field is generated by a charge q1, which is at the position r1. Then the electric field at the point P, remember that if there is a charge q at P, the force between q1 and q2 is given by q1 q2 divided by the distance square, the square of this distance. And for the electric field, I divide by the charge test charge I am putting at P. So, therefore, the electric field at the point P due to the charge q1 located at r1 is given by, and the point P is at the position r, 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0, this is that term with permittivity, q1 and r minus r1, that is the direction of this vector, divided by r minus r1 cube. You notice I have written r minus r1 vector at the top and the cube at the bottom, so that the dimension actually is 1 over r square. Now, I come to what is known as a superposition principle. Now, superposition principle is that if the source of the electric field is due to multiple charges, many charges. Supposing I have got a charge q1 at r1, q2 at r2, etc., etc. Then, so this picture for instance talks about only 2 charges, but this I can generalize it to any number of charges. I have a charge q1 at the position r1, q2 at the position r2, and I am still looking at what is the field at the point P. Now, notice that electric field is a vector. So, therefore, the charge, the q1 gives rise to a force, the field which is directed like this along the line joining P and q1, and it has some magnitude. Similarly, the force, the charge q2 at P gives rise to the electric field which is directed like this. You do a vector addition. So, the resultant field at P due to q1 at r1 and q2 at r2 is the vector sum of the forces exerted on a test charge, on a unit test charge kept at the point P. Now, if I generalize it to multiple charges, then this becomes E, the electric field at the point P is equal to 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0 sum over I, q I, which is the ith charge located at the position r I, vector r, which is vector r is the position vector of the point P with respect to our origin, minus r I by r minus r I cube. Now, this is known as the superposition principle. Now, we assume that the superposition principle is valid for the electric field. That is, the effect of multiple charges is simply the linear sum of the effects due to individual charges. Fair enough? So, we have talked about what happens to the electric field due to a single point charge or multiple charges located at discrete points in space. Now, I can generalize it to include continuous charge distribution. So, let us look at what is meant by continuous charge distribution. Supposing I take a curve, and in this arbitrarily shaped curve, there is a charge which is uniformly distributed. The uniformly distributed charge has a charge density, linear charge density, lambda. In principle, this lambda could depend upon the position on that curve, but we have assumed that the charges are uniformly distributed. So, if you take a charge element or length element delta L along that curve, then the amount of charge in that line element delta L is delta q, which is equal to lambda times the length delta L. So, one defines the charge density lambda, linear charge density lambda, as limit of delta L going to 0, delta q by delta L. Now, remember that in principle this lambda could vary from point to point, but I have taken for simplicity that lambda is a constant. This is not implied by this definition. Now, let us look at how does one express the electric field due to a linear charge distribution. We have talked about superposition principle. Superposition principle says that if I have many charges, then the electric field at a point due to collection of charges is equal to the sum of the electric field due to the constituent charges. Now, if I have a continuous charge distribution, the summation goes over to an integration. So, what I have is this. If you refer to this picture, this is some arbitrarily chosen origin, the result does not depend upon origin. So, take for example, a small length element delta L, this is the curve delta L along the curve. The amount of charge in this is given by this length element, I am calling it delta L prime, and the prime will be my index on the curve. So, delta L prime, therefore, the charge is lambda times delta L prime of this little infinitesimally small length element. Now, I am interested in calculating the electric field at a point P located at the position R. So, I connect these, this is the vector R I, which means this gives me the vector position of point P with respect to the ith element, length element, and then I simply add up, or in this case I do an integration, add 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0 lambda times dl prime. Lambda times dl prime is the amount of charge there, that replaces the qi in our earlier expression, and the strength of the field, which is vector r minus r prime, which is just the r I prime vector, divided by r minus r prime cube, and the integration is over the entire length there. Now, remember that even if you take a small enough length, there are literally very large number of charges there, because the discrete charges that I have in a material are actually electrons, which give rise to the electric field. But however, whatever I am talking about should not be done at the atomic level, because there are very few electrons, and this continuous limit that I am talking about is obviously not applicable there. Now, I can extend this to a distribution of charge on a surface, which is in 2 dimensions. So, here I have shown you an irregular surface. There is an irregular surface, and there is a charge distributed there. Once again, how do I define a surface charge density, which I will indicate by sigma. So, what I do is I look at a small area element. That small area element I will call it as dSi prime again, because prime is the index which I am using for coordinates on the surface. So, if the amount of charge in that area element happens to be delta q, then I define a surface charge density sigma as the limit of delta q by delta s as the surface element delta s goes to 0. So, the total charge would be integration of sigma ds over the entire surface. Now, to find the electric field due to such a surface at a point P, which is located at the position vector r, is exactly we proceed the same way. Suppose this element d s I is located at this position here, position some r prime. Now, what I am interested is this vector, and so therefore, the field at this point is given by, there is a small error in the expression for the electric field given in this slide. So, let me write it down. The electric field at the position r is given by 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0 integral over the surface. Now, sigma, which in principle could depend upon the position r prime d s prime. So, that is your charge element, and the electric field we know varies as inverse square. So, vector r minus r prime divided by r minus r prime cube. So, this is the surface charge distribution. What about the volume charges? Now, once again, the volume charges are this. So, this is a rho dV. I take a small volume element dV, and the once again I am interested in calculating the field at the point P. So, therefore, the amount of charge that is contained in this is rho dV prime. dV prime is the volume element there, and once again I use the same expression. The electric field at the point r is given by 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0 integral over the volume rho r prime, that is the volume density, dV prime, which is the element of charge in that element of volume, times vector r minus r prime divided by r minus r prime cube. So, that gives me the electric field due to what I call as the volume charge distribution. The volume charge density rho is defined as limit of delta v going to 0, delta q by delta v, where delta q is the amount of charge that is contained in that volume element. So, the total charge q is, you have to integrate over that entire volume, is integral of rho dV. Let me illustrate some of this with couple of examples of calculating the electric field. I have taken a line charge of length L, and I have sort of placed it such that the origin is taken at the center. It is a simple line, and I am interested in calculating what is the field, electric field at the point x y, point P, whose coordinates are x y. The line is along the x direction, and of course, the y axis is perpendicular to it. So, let us look at this. How does one do this? Consider a charge element at a distance x prime and or having a length dx prime. Now, what I do is this, that this red arrow indicates the direction of the force at the point P, the electric field at the point P due to the charges contained in this element dx prime, which is of course lambda times dx prime. Now, what is this distance r prime? Now, notice r prime square is given by, you can complete a right angle triangle here. R prime square is given by x minus x prime whole square. X is the position x coordinate of P, plus y square, y is the y coordinate of P. So, x and y are fixed, whereas this x prime will change depending upon where I am taking this length element dx prime. Now, and the vector r prime is given by x minus x prime I plus y j. So, therefore, the field at the point x y due to such an element dx prime, which is located at x prime 0, 0 is the y coordinate, is simply given by our familiar expression, which is 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0, the amount of charge that is contained in dx prime, namely lambda dx prime, the distance cube. Remember, the square of the distance was x minus x prime whole square plus y square. So, distance cube is x minus x prime whole square plus y square raised to the power 3 by 2 times the position vector here, that is x minus x prime I plus y j. Now, so what I have done here is to write down the x and the y component of this electric field. That is simply writing this term and this term separate. Now, for an arbitrary position x y, this integration cannot be done in a closed form, and one normally you can however go to computer and sort of plot what are the E x and E y. However, let us look at a particularly important case. Let us look at an infinite charge. Now, if I have an infinite charge, instead of the wire being located from minus L by 2 to plus L by 2, it is from minus infinity to plus infinity. In this limit, these integrals which we talked about here, look at the E x prime integral, the E x. So, if it is from minus L by 2 to plus L by 2, this is a difficult integral. Now, suppose it is from minus infinity to plus infinity, I can reduce this integration very simply by replacing x minus x prime with some other variable, let us say z. Then the integral that I get is this, that suppose I say x minus x prime is equal to z, then dx prime is minus dz. So, this integral becomes integral z dz z square plus y square to the power 3 by 2 from minus infinity to plus infinity. And this integral is 0 because this is an odd integral. And however, so therefore, the x component vanishes. The y component, however, does not vanish. Remember that the y component was the, so go back a little bit, y component is given by this. If you have the same substitution, x minus x prime equal to z, you get y dz by z square plus y square. So, this is what I have written down here to the power 3 by 2. This integral you can do, very easily. So, by substituting z is equal to y tan theta. So, E y is equal to lambda by 4 pi epsilon 0 integral from minus infinity to plus infinity y dz. So, y is of course a fixed coordinate. So, I can't change it dz. So, therefore, if z is equal to y tan theta, dz becomes y sec square theta d theta. So, let us write down dz is another y. So, that gives me y square sec square theta d theta divided by I have got z square plus y square and z is y tan theta. So, I get y square into 1 plus tan square theta inside. So, what I get is y cube 1 plus tan square theta is sec square theta. So, I get sec cube theta. So, therefore, what I get here is lambda by 4 pi epsilon 0 and I got a 1 over y there, an integral of 1 over sec cube theta, which is cos theta d theta. Now, notice that I said z is equal to y tan theta. So, if z is going from minus infinity to plus infinity, then my tan theta must go from minus pi by 2 to plus pi by 2. An integral of cos theta d theta is sin theta, which if I put the limit, I get 2 from this integration. So, I will be left with lambda over 2 pi epsilon 0 y. This is the electric field due to an infinite line charge. As a second example, let us look at the field on the axis of a charged ring. This is the ring of radius r, the ring of radius r. This distance, I am looking at the field along the axis, which I have taken as the x axis. The point P is at a distance x, which is a fixed distance from the origin, and this is where I am interested in calculating the field. Now, let us look at what happens. This incidentally cuts the x y plane perpendicular to that. So, if I now take again, as we did earlier, a length element here, ignore the width that is shown for clarity. If I take a length element here, then this is at a distance r and the field at the point P is along this. The direction is shown by this red arrow. This distance is equal to, for any element, is equal to square root of x square plus r square. And let us suppose this is at an angle theta, this element is at an angle theta with respect to the geometry that has been shown. Now, this is the direction of the electric field due to this charge element, and I can resolve it into an x component and a y component. Now, notice the direction of the field d E is along the line joining the element to the point P, and the magnitude is 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0 lambda dl, which is the charge, x square plus r square. Now, remember all the elements, because this is a circle which is perpendicular to the xy plane, which is cutting the xy plane perpendicular to the x axis. X axis is the axis of that ring. So, all the elements are located at the same distance from the point P, and that distance is square root of x square plus y square. So, what I get now is the x. So, this is the direction, and if this angle is theta, then the x component of the field is d E cosine theta and the y component of the field is d E sin theta. So, this is what I have written down, lambda dl by x square plus r square this is a constant, because x is a fixed number, r is the radius, cosine theta. And so, now if you look at what is cosine theta. So, cosine theta is nothing but x divided by this distance again. So, therefore, what I get is 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0 x by x square plus r square to the power 3 by 2 lambda dl. Now, all these numbers here are constant, they do not depend upon what is the position of dl. So, if you now have to integrate, I am talking about x component at the moment. If you now integrate, all those being constant come out, and you have to integrate over the length dl, which is obviously equal to 2 pi r, the circumference. So, the x component that you get of the electric field is q by 4 pi epsilon 0 x by x square plus r square to the power 3 by 2. What happened to the y component? Look at this, that while the x component added up, the y component will cancel, because from symmetrically placed element, supposing I look at this section, the force will be directed like this. If it is directed like this, the x component will still be along the x axis, but the y component will be in the reverse direction. So, the y component of the electric field cancels by symmetry, and the field is directed along the axis. The field is directed along the axis. So, therefore, the electric field due to a charged ring on its axis is given by q by 4 pi epsilon 0 x divided by x square plus r square to the power 3 by 2. There is an interesting consequence thereof. Supposing the distance at which you are interested in measuring the field is much larger than the radius, what would you expect? See, if you go far, far away, a small ring looks to you like a point charge. So, we must get back in this limit the electric field due to point charge, and you can see what actually happens. See, if x is much larger than r, then I can neglect this r square in the denominator, and x square to the power 3 by 2 will give me x cube, and I am left with x by x cube, which is simply equal to 1 over x square, which is nothing but my Coulomb's law. So, we have been talking about the electric field due to point charge to begin with, a distribution of point charges at discrete points. We talked about superposition principle. Let us recall back the vector field concept which we had discussed a few lectures back. Supposing I have a point charge, positive charge. Look at this picture. Now, your field, electric field due to a positive charge. Remember, my test charge is always taken as positive. So, a test charge will be repelled in this field, and the closer the test charge comes to the source charge, which is positive here, stronger will be the electric field. Now, clearly, since it is a point charge, I expect a perfect symmetry between the forces. So, this is the way the electric lines of force, the vector field looks like for a positive charge. Reverse is the situation for the negative charge, because they should all point towards the charge. What happens if I have a positive charge and a negative charge? The lines of force must start, the force is directed such that the lines of force are those where if you put a test charge there, it experiences a force along the tangent. and it must get away from a positive charge, go towards a negative charge. So, that was the force, lines of force due to a positive and a negative charge. And if I have two positive charges, it will repel, and so therefore, you notice that now two lines of force can never intersect, because at the point of intersection then the field will be ill defined. So, what we have done today is to discuss the concept of an electric field. Next time we will be discussing the nature of the electric field and talk about concepts such as potential and consequences thereof.